recording the talks and the Q&A. So don't say anything really weird or personal during the question bit. Just nice, plain, neutral questions would be great. Right. So this notion of unity, it heads the traditions, and it heads the traditions in my life. I'm married. I've been married to someone for a while. We've been together for 21 years. And our personal lives come second to the relationship. My notion of relationships when I got to AA was this awful transaction where I sell my crappy old self to you and get the marvellous you in return and hope you never discover what a schmuck I am. And then I realised that you're doing exactly the same back to me, and then 6 months later what starts out as a romance made in heaven is actually a romance made in hell, where I feel terribly shortchanged. My relationships are entirely transactional. They're about my feelings, about getting my self-worth managed and controlled and elevated and being constantly propped up. I was like a sieve. However much love you poured into me, it just drained out the bottom. And I needed more 5 minutes later, more validation, more approval, more indications that I was the center of your attention. If I didn't get your attention the whole time, if I didn't get my own way, I felt invisible and as though there wasn't any point. The point of the other person was to make up for my inadequacies. That's not a good basis for relationships. Just FYI, if you've been practicing that one and it hasn't been working, it's never going to work. The unity I practice in my marriage with my other half is maintaining peace at home is more important than anything, and maintaining that unity at home. For years he wouldn't talk about work at home, and for a long time, because I was emotionally immature, I felt that I was being locked out of his inner reality. The truth of it was that he didn't want to infect the home with all the crap that was going on in his job. He was helping create a space which was entirely safe and lovely with nothing poisonous in it. I thought he was excluding me. He was doing me a favor. And a few years into recovery, how many of you are in a relationship right now with another human being in a sort of romantic sense, or a few tentative hands going? How many have been in the last 5 years? Okay, so a few of you. When you get to around 7 years into the relationship, you're going to say to yourself, this appears to be the law. The romance has gone out of it. All of the excitement has gone out of it. And then you meet someone, just by chance, you meet someone at work or at your home group. And clearly the universe was throwing you together because you were meant for each other. And you've got this choice between boring old whatever at home and then this exciting new person. And it's all a lie. But it doesn't seem like a lie. It seems like your whole life is on the line. And I happen to be in the hometown of my sponsor's sponsor, who was a man who got sober in 1957 and is still alive today, and still sober today. So something he's been doing has been working. And the sort of contemporary, if I can have a dig at pop psychology, the contemporary pop psychology notion is you have to let all your feelings out. You have to be honest about everything that's going on inside you, because you can't have intimacy unless it's into me see, and you're all telling each other everything. I'm sure you've come across that notion. If only you could just say what you're feeling. He said the opposite. He said the last thing you should do is let your other half know anything that is going on inside you with regard. Your darkness is your darkness. It's not his business. You go and deal with that with someone else. And it took about a year of me basically canning it when I was at home, putting on a front of unity when I didn't always feel it, dealing with my stuff elsewhere. And I realized after about a year, I knew at a cellular level, if I had left my other half for the romantic ideal, I would have made the biggest mistake of my life. And that there was nothing wrong with my relationship. There was nothing wrong with him. There was a problem with me and an addict part of me, which was looking for the relationship to fulfill the same role in my life that alcohol had. And I thought there was a problem with the relationship. The most important thing was to deal with that stuff elsewhere with people who get that dynamic. So if you look around, the old people in AA who look very dull, they'll know how to deal with this because if they're married, and he'd been married for, this sponsor's sponsor would be married for 50, 60 years at that point. He knew what he was talking about. He knew how to stay married. If you want to know how to stay in a relationship and make it work, find someone who's been married for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and you might get an idea. Don't get it off the television. Unity, it beats everything else. So when there's a conflict between the relationship and any particular axe I have to grind, the relationship comes first. And then the relationship becomes the vessel in which both of us sail down the river of life. Imagine trying to swim down a river yourself, and imagine the difference between that and being in a boat where the boat is carrying you down the river. And that's the difference between being single and being in a successful partnership with someone else. So the boat is more important marginally than what is going on with any of the individuals in the boat. And the last thing you want to do is shoot a hole in the bottom of the boat. And the best way to shoot a hole in the bottom of the boat, I'm going to tell you so you know not to do it. When I was in my relationship for a few years, and friends of mine will know this story, so I apologize in advance. I was doing the washing up loudly because I wanted my other half to know that it was his turn to do the washing up. And it didn't produce the result that I wanted. And so I did it even more loudly. And then I thought, let's escalate. I cracked open a can of Create Problem. And I said, it would be nice if you did the washing up sometimes. And he left the room and came back a few minutes later and he said, I've never ever criticized you. I could make a list as well. And suddenly I was fully aware of all of the things that I do that my other half was putting up with. And so where this hooks into the traditions, tradition 10, having no opinion on outside matters. What's an outside matter? Anything he does is an outside matter, and it's something I have no opinion on. And I tell you the difference between being in a relationship. I grew up in a household which was very gravely affected by alcoholism, and there was lots of monitoring of other people. You felt watched, and you were indeed being watched. You were being watched very, very closely, and if something was wrong, you were told. And the difference between that and being in a relationship with someone who, without even having a program, knows how to apply the principles of pity, patience, and tolerance. So tradition 10, having no opinion on outside matters. And as I go through my day, I'm by nature neurotic. Now, I know you up here in Manchester are all very, very well balanced and serene at all times, but you might meet some neurotic people sometimes, and you might need to know how to deal with them. And my chief weapon in battling that neurosis is tradition 10, no opinion on outside matters. What are the 7 outside matters which are none of my business? Because these are the 7 topics that my neurotic mind tends to fixate on, become preoccupied with, and waste the whole day thinking about. And then if I'm really bad, I'll go to a meeting and start complaining about the things I've been thinking about all day, in the hope that if I talk about the things, if I rehearse to everyone else all the things I've been worried about, the worry will go, but it doesn't, it just amplifies it. And the 7 things which are none of my business are, number 1, other people. Which ones? All of them. Number 2, the world. That's anything out there which is not other people. So we've covered a lot of territory. That's just the first 2 out of 7. The third thing, which is none of my business, is the past. It's dealt with in a forensic, clinical way in step 4 and step 8. Look, write down what you need to write down, put it away again. In step 11 at night, you look at the day, 5 minutes, what went wrong, corrective measures for tomorrow, put it away. Don't dwell on it. Once it's done, it's done. The future, if I need to plan for the future, I'll spend 5 minutes, deliberately bring my the higher power into it. Say, how do I handle this? If I'm told, I write it down. If I'm not, I come back the next day. But then, no thinking about the future. So no thinking about other people, no thinking about the world, no thinking about the past, no thinking about the future. Next thing not to think about is me. Because I've taken step 3, which means I'm now in God's hands, and all God needs to do is to tell me daily what to do. I need to do that, and everything else is taken care of. That's the whole point of the step 3 deal, is I no longer need to think about me or my life. I only need to think about what actions God wants me to take today. It's a very, very good deal, by the way, because it gives me very little to do. It gives almost everything to God to do. And God is considerably bigger than me, so the deal is fair. And the last thing is the results. So whether it's in work, whether it's step work, whether it's if I'm sponsoring someone, how well are they? What are the results of my sponsorship? Even so, none of my business. When none of those things are my business, and I have guards posted in my mind against attacks by thoughts about these 7 things, it really is, that American phrase, not today, Satan, sorry ass thoughts about nothing. And this is the practice of tradition 10 on a daily basis, to keep my focus on stay close to God, perform his work well, stay close to God, perform his work well. That is it, because God is found in the present, not in any of those other things. Another great thing which connects with this is tradition 4. And the basic principle of tradition 4 is, even if I'm in a relationship with someone else, a friend of mine would say that one of the most horrific images in the culture is of 2 people in a relationship sitting on a sofa. One of them turns off the TV and then says to the other one as they're holding their hand, "No secrets, eh?" This idea that the 2 of you are so enmeshed that neither of you have your own private emotions or space or individuality or own friends, that it's amazing how often you hear in a step 5, people looking inside each other's phones, looking inside each other's email addresses, snooping round the back to find out what is going on. Tradition 4 means I do my thing, you do your thing, and sometimes we do things together. The things that you do when I'm not looking are none of my business. Who you speak to when I'm not there is none of my business. What you think, what you feel is none of my business. And I came across a situation, a poor chap was suffering very much in a relationship, and the partner had said to him that when he was in a bad mood, even if he was behaving really well, they could tell he was in a bad mood, and he needed not to be in a bad mood so that they could be okay. This peering into other people's minds, working out what they're thinking and feeling, and then reacting to it, and then wanting to control what they're thinking and feeling so that I will feel better, that had to go, because that's insanity. Because there's no respect for the other person's integrity and space. So my other half is as different from me as can be imagined. He's very low-key, very relaxed. He's a strategic thinker. I like detail. I like to be clean and tidy. He doesn't give a shit. I am phenomenally organised. I basically need to hire someone to get him to an airport so that he actually gets on a flight. There was one recently, a long-haul flight, where he's supposed to come and see me where I was. And I think he got to Heathrow 48 minutes before the flight was due to leave. And he sailed through, stately as a fucking galleon, and barely broke his step, but got on the plane like the last person on it. I don't know how he does it. It would drive me crazy. And my job is to say how he is none of my business. This is not my job to fix, change, or control him. And people often talk about boundaries. So I go to Al-Anon as well. I've been in Al-Anon for over 30, well, coming up to 30 years since my first Al-Anon meeting. And I did an Al-Anon workshop in Manchester a few years ago. And it was in someone's house. It was around the kitchen table. There were about 7 of them. I knew some of them a little. They were young women. They were all married to addicts of various types. And they were very polite. There was lots of food. It was a wonderful day. And when it started to get to questions and answers, you could tell they'd been politely listening. But what they really wanted to know was how they could set boundaries. And what that meant was what they could do under the guise of working the program, which would get their husbands to start behaving more as they thought they should. And what I've learned is boundaries are not about you. Boundaries are about me. And because I'm organised, also because although I don't sound it, I'm born with a French passport. So I do the cooking at home 6 days a week. My other half is allowed to do the cooking 1 day a week. When I do the cooking, it's on the table at exactly the same time every day. Feast. When he does it, he's a very, very good cook, but we're lucky if the food is on the table by 11 o'clock at night. And I normally go to bed at 9:30 or 10, so this is difficult. For years, I was trying to get him through every imaginable. I thought I could outwit him into somehow doing it earlier, and the skill he deploys in resisting these efforts is admirable. And recently, I switched tack and said, I'm actually finally going to admit defeat here, that there is literally nothing I can say or do which will fundamentally change this person's attitude, nature, behaviour, actions, anything. But what I can do is say what I'm going to do. And I said to him, but he'd always say every week, no, dinner will, he'd been saying this for 17 years. No, don't worry, dinner will be on the table by 9:30 or by 9 o'clock. And I said to him, that would be great, but if it's not, I'll have a snack at 9:30 and just go to bed, and then your food, we'll have it tomorrow, it'll be delicious, we'll have it for a couple of days, so hooray. So I didn't ask him to change. I changed what I was doing, and he was okay with that. And I didn't have to, and this is the interesting thing to me, is that I didn't have to explain it. All I had to do when setting this boundary was say what I was going to do. And what I've learned in Al-Anon, and this tradition 4 is all about boundaries, about what is mine and what is yours, and then there's the in-between bit which is negotiated. And with what is mine, when I say what I'm going to do, I don't have to justify it, I don't have to explain it, I don't have to defend it. I don't have to express any intentions like the reason I'm doing this is because I want to do, because no one cares. When I'm deploying JEDI, justification, explanation, defense and intentions, Jedi mind tricks, I'm trying to manipulate the other person into buying why I'm saying I'm going to do what I'm going to do. It's putting my decision, which I've already made, on the negotiating table. So I've learned to take those decisions, or if I make a decision, that's the end of it. So if a client says, I work for lots of different clients, if a client says, would you like to do this piece of work? I'll say no. And I won't give any explanation. I'm not available. And the peace I get from not explaining and justifying and defending. I just act. And the funny thing is, people know then that it's non-negotiable and they tend to respect it. And I don't have to repeat myself. If they don't buy it first time, I don't have to. They heard. And so I'm firm about what is my life. With my other half, I leave his life to him. And then there's the common ground. And the common ground is governed by the group conscience, which means whenever we're going to decide something together, we decide it together. And exactly as I do in a business meeting or a group conscience in AA, I'm not trying to fight the cause of a particular constituency or camp or view. I want what's for the good of all. And when both of you are trying to do that, we end up yielding to each other and meeting in the middle somehow. But it's because there's a fundamental desire to retain unity rather than peddling our own agendas and grinding our own axes. And we decide something together. And if we can't decide, we don't argue about it, we postpone. I was at a group conscience meeting at my home group a few years ago, and someone got very, very hot under the collar, and they said a very bad thing about someone else. And then they got very hot under the collar, and then everyone else got very hot under the collar. And the chair said, "This has got a little overheated. Let's discuss this next month." Perfect. Because by the time we came back a month later, about some people had left the group by then. You see, you give time, and God sorts out so many things. Solutions don't need to be forced. So if Jonathan and I can't agree on something, we don't. We leave it. Almost nothing needs to be agreed then and there. There were a few things where I would get to pull rank with my mother's care in the care home before she died. I was the son. With the place we live in, I own the place, so I have final decision on that. There are other things where he has final decision because, frankly, his sense is better than mine on certain things, so I defer to him. But that's a different topic. That's a sort of concepts topic, how you divide that up. Traditions 5 and 6, primary purpose, and not lending our name to other activities. So the primary purpose in AA is to carry the message. And I have to say, it is the primary purpose in my life. There's a scene in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, if anyone is old enough that was a young person's program a while ago, and now it's become an old person's program. Someone referred to that vintage comedy Friends a while ago. I thought, you can't. I Love Lucy is a vintage comedy. Friends is very recent. Where was I going? What was the comedy before that? What was the thing that I mentioned before? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There was one of the Vampire Slayers in a historical flashback, the New York one, where the kid's been kind of tagged along to this vampire slaying thing, and she says to the kid, "It's all about the mission." Let's just cover some basics about alcoholism. My alcoholism is this. If I've got any substance in my body, I'm relegated to the bleachers. I'm no longer playing the game. The game is playing itself. It will play itself out, convincing me that I'm in charge. I'm not. My foot is caught in the stirrups of a galloping horse. The horse is in charge. I'm banging along behind it, saying, "Look how well I'm managing this situation." That's my addiction when it's activated. And my sponsor would say, "We know of no program that can interrupt that process. You try and interrupt it." There was someone at my home group, God bless him, a while ago, who was having trouble with the not drinking bit of the program, which is admittedly one of the trickier bits of the program. But he was not doing well, and he turned up to the meeting more than half cut, with alcohol and clearly some other things. And it kind of activated everyone's untreated Al-Anonism in the room, and you saw every imaginable emotional reaction of concern and irritation and contempt and control and ambulances were called and blah, blah, blah. And everyone was so proud of how they sort of helped him to the hospital, got him to a detox. We found out about 2 days later he discharged himself. You can get someone in the right place. You can get him into a treatment centre. If they want to drink, they'll drink. If they want to escape, they'll escape. And even if it's yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, all the way through, sign the little forms, do the little groups where you draw pictures of your addiction, things like that. 6 weeks later, you're released on the train on the way back, on the chopper to Cheadle. You're knocking back the miniatures because the addiction is not done. It's done when it's done. So that's my addiction. Now, occasionally, the addiction would give me a reprieve. There'd be this little window of opportunity where the horror of what I was doing was somehow so potent in my mind that there was a moment I could stop for a day and then a second day. And that opportunity has to be grabbed. If it isn't grabbed, who knows if it's ever going to get given again. So, because we can't do anything about the physical side, the only thing I can do is stay away from the first drink, stay away from the first drug. Yet, that is precisely the thing I cannot do on my own. Because I get hijacked and then I get hostage taken by the addiction. Hijacked, high, hostage, ho, hi ho, it's off to work we go, and then I'm off. The hijacking is like this. People talk about triggers. My trigger is it being one of the days of the week and one of the times. It can be 7 in the morning, it can be 3 in the afternoon. Things can be going well, things can be going bad. It doesn't matter. The thought occurs. Sometimes the thought just affects this manual override, and with horror I realise I'm going to drink or use or something, and I don't even want to be doing it, but I know it's going to happen. Other times it convinces me that it's a good idea, that maybe I just need to experiment just to see if like the physical craving is still activated in my life, or perhaps I've gotten over it because it's been a few months. Sometimes it runs through this reasoning, but it's not reasoning. I'm mesmerized by this bullshit that it's spinning. But in any case, that's the hijacking situation. The thought of a drink occurs to me, and it's now in charge, trying to convince me that I'm running my life. And once it's activated, we move from a hijack situation to a hostage situation, and it keeps me hostage for as long as it wants to. So I need something which gets in the way between the thought of a drink and my action. In other words, my action in my life needs to be based on something other than the thought that's just come into my head. My higher power wasn't me in the sense of thinking I was great when I got sober, but I was my own higher power because I did what I thought was right. I did what had just occurred to me to do. There was very little forethought. Even when I had reasons for doing things, I'd already decided to do the thing. Then you have to construct the reasons afterwards so you can explain to people why you're doing what you're doing. See, explanations, they're not good. They're not helpful. I was running my life based on me. I needed to stop running my life based on me and run it based on something else. And that something else is doing God's will. What's the thing that I'm supremely fitted to do, as is everyone in this room, is help other alcoholics and addicts have exactly the same experience that we've had, which has enabled us miraculously to stay sober against the odds. That is, if that's all that one does for the rest of one's life, that's a very good deal. One's achieved more than most people on the planet. If you think that each person, drunk or sober, is going to affect hundreds, if not thousands of people, if you can be instrumental in helping half a dozen, you've helped thousands of people. And most people in the world don't have that opportunity. So that's enough. Now there's a line so that's tradition 5, but it's only part of it. In a sense, the program is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The nut is this problem of this occasionally occurring thought of a drink. And if one is an alcoholic, one is occasionally going to have the thought of a drink. Occasionally the thought of a drink or something else will occur to me. And you're like, what, you mean I have to turn over my whole life just for that one moment that my mind might tell me to drink? Yes, I'm afraid that's the way it works. It's like an insurance policy. You have to have the insurance policy there the whole time because you don't know when you're going to be burgled. You have to have the airbag fitted in the car at all times because you don't know when you're going to crash. And it's the same with any kind of insurance. Unfortunately, the insurance means your whole life has to be placed in the hands of this supreme power. But in the small print it says, P.S., all of your other problems will be solved as well. As they have been, in my case, one by one, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Everything has been solved or has been landscaped. So some things you get to keep, but you get to work around them. So my reactions to certain things are still not normal in terms of being statistically average, but you work around your nature, and the program has enabled me to change a bunch of things and then accept another bunch of things in such a way that I don't harm other people with them. Now, because of this, there's a second part to working the program, apart from carrying the message, and it's on page 19 of the big book, where it says a much more important demonstration of the principles of the program lies in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. Now, the danger with that line is that once one gets a few years of sobriety, takes the foot off the gas a bit and says, right, I've got a career now, I've got a family, I've got all of these other things. And I can't tell you how many people you see over the years gradually leaving AA one by one and very often coming to very sticky ends because alcoholism has been waiting. So what's the relationship? It seems like it's doublespeak here. So which is more important? Is it carrying the message or is it practicing the principles? It says a very clever thing on that page. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. The reason I trusted people in AA when they said the program worked was not because of what they said in meetings. It was the way they demonstrated in their lives. They were effective and efficient and functional. They could handle stuff. They didn't care what other people thought about them. I mean, in the bad neurotic way, of course, because they kept their nose clean. But they sailed through life. It was the demonstration outside AA which made me trust them inside AA. And you know when you meet people in AA whether you would give them the keys to something. Whether they still have that furtive look or whether this is someone who is confident and able to sit comfortably in the seat and all of those things. So the rest of my life, I treat it as though it's very important because everything that one does, if you think it's God's will, it's all must be done well. But it's quietly thinking, the reason I'm doing this is because it's God's will, not because I have my own agenda here. And this is where the tradition 6 comes in. So we must never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name, blah, 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 lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Money, property, and prestige. So my finances, income, expenses, assets, liabilities, property, all of my stuff, things I own, prestige, ambitions, what I think of me, what you think of me, reputation, all of those things are deadly. Having money and property and prestige as my God and taskmaster, it's completely merciless. So in the outside world, I'm not spectacularly talented at anything, but I was reasonably okay at a couple of things I've done. And every time you think you get to a particular position, you think, I'll be all right then. Once I've got this qualification, once I've got this job, once I've got this income, once I've got once I've got ... I'll be fine. And you get there, now you haven't solved anything. Before, I was frightened that I wouldn't get these things. When I got them, I was frightened I would lose them. And in between, I hadn't noticed. They hadn't changed anything inside me. And as George Carlin, the American comedian, would say, trying to satisfy yourself internally with external things is like taping sandwiches to your legs because you're hungry. And it doesn't work. That's the whole premise behind step 3. But it's actually deeper than that. All through the big book, it operates with this idea that we're actors playing roles. Do you remember in the step 3 passage, it says we're like the actor who thinks he's the director, controlling the ballet and trying to control all the other players. It also says in the big book on page 28 that, and one might dislike the language, but it's the idea that matters. It says we're all children of a living creator. And that's a very odd phrase in contemporary England, at any rate. But the idea is this: if I'm the offspring of God in some way, that means I'm made of the same substance. And God is not made of flesh and blood. God is something else. God is spirit. So I'm spirit. Therefore, what is my material life then? What is my material body? All of these external things I think I'm me. Sexuality or sex and gender and nationality and ethnicity and all of those things are what I'm wearing. They're not who I am. The job I have is what I'm doing. It's not who I am. What you think of me as a thing out there, it's not who I am. I'm the actor playing these roles. So if you're an actor in Macbeth, and Macbeth, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's been putting it off, waiting to watch it at some point in the future, but things don't turn out super well for lots of the characters. There are some very sticky ends, literally sticky. And if you're the actor, imagine you're an actor in Macbeth and you forget that you're an actor and you think you're one of the characters, you're going to sleep with one eye open because there are a lot of people getting stabbed in it. But if you remember you're the actor, you're okay. God doesn't care how well I do out there. God cares how well I try to do God's will. And I can't fail with the trying. I can fail out there, but I can't fail with the trying. If I'm spirit, I can't die. Nothing can hurt my spirit. Things can hurt my circumstances, my body, my finances, my ambitions. If I'm detached from those things, if they're affected, I'm not affected. And that's where the real freedom lies. The spiritual awakening in the steps is when I wake up to the fact that I'm more than just the physical life I happen to be operating in. Anne Lamott, also not conference approved, said that death is a fairly major change of address. So you're going somewhere, but you're still going to be you afterwards. So what is there to worry about? Now, how does this fit with tradition 6? The name talks about lending the name. The name is my identity. I must not lend my identity to anything other than being spirit. As soon as I do, I'm in danger. And when I do that, I have to pull back and say, no, all I have to do is seek to do God's will, stay close to God. And then everything I do, I enjoy. And I really enjoy my work. I get very disappointed if I can't. Well, I love it because it's not work, because I'm detached from it, because I don't give a shit, basically. I give a shit about making a good effort, but not about the thing itself. Then everything is play. So now there's an awful lot more that could be said about the traditions, but we've had almost 40 minutes of me wittering it away. Do we have any questions on anything to do with the traditions, either what we've talked about, traditions in life, or the traditions more traditionally?
George, alcoholic.
Hi,
George. Just a bit about. So first of all, that was brilliant, by the way. I was with you the entire way. However, some things I'm now like pondering in my head and overthinking probably. Just the main thing about the relationships, and I've heard a couple of people talk about the traditions in life before, and I think I was a bit too early into really know what the fuck they were talking about at the time, but I love the sentiment. But the thing with the traditions in a relationship, like comparing it, into life and then into the relationship, does some of that, and again I'll preface this with I do actually agree with most of it, but does some of that entail that you are with the right person, if that makes sense? As in, because it's like the thing about how like their life is none of their business sort of thing, idea. Does that entail that their decisions and their things aren't affecting you, if that makes, are affecting your life and your business, if that makes sense? I don't know if I'm just...
No, there's a good question. There's a lot in there. The first thing is this notion of the right person. When I was a teenager, one of the major questions that I and my contemporaries would ask ourselves and talk about ad nauseam, who am I? I don't know who I am. And trying to work out your identity in 1,000 different ways. And we were all barking up the wrong tree, because who I am is a path that I walk down. It's not something which is fixed in stone. So one doesn't know who one is until one has got literally to the end of one's life, to the last moment. And then the sum total of that is who you've been. Do you see what I mean? Because there's who you are in an absolute sense, which is spirit. But then there's who you are in the material sense. And that's something which is built up. It can't be decided. And so, in line with that idea, one isn't with the right person. One needs to find someone who shares the same values and direction in which they're willing to grow. I mean, I was I think the phrase is hot mess, when I got into, I was better than I had been, but there was a lot of unresolved stuff when I got into this relationship. Thank God my other half didn't say, oh, is this the right person? I understand the question. Yeah. But, so a lot of this has got to do with potential and values, rather than is the person already, sort of, as it were, actualized as a particular thing. But there is some, there's a wonderful, to bring it back to the AA literature, there's a wonderful passage in the 12 and 12, which used to be the book people would go to for the steps, and now it's very unpopular because it doesn't contain instructions, so it's not super useful, but there's lots of very good material, particularly in step 12. It says, when boy meets girl on AA campus, and it talks about compatibility at the physical and mental and emotional and spiritual level. You've got to get your own shit sorted out first. If you haven't got your own shit sorted out first, good luck. And what does having one's own shit sorted out mean? I think it means essentially having got to a place where you understand, I understand fundamentally, I am 100% responsible for my beliefs, attitudes, values, thoughts, actions, feelings, internal life and external life. And you are 100% responsible for yours. If there's any sense that people are responsible for each other's thoughts or feelings or attitudes or beliefs or blah, 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 I don't know how that gets fixed. Now, my other half and I both, even at that time, had that fundamental view that we were responsible for ourselves, not for the other person. And that stops the exploding past the parcel with who's responsible for whatever anyone is feeling, with the blame being passed back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So that's a game I can't play. But the great thing is, once you sort that out in yourself, it's as though all the people that want to play that game, boy, do they keep a distance. And then the people that understand that start to find you interesting. People who wouldn't have touched you with a barge pole 6 months earlier, they get that you're now safe because you're not about to attack them because of how, because of basically hurt feelings. There are some other things as well. It's really helpful not to be in a relationship with someone in active addiction. That's just a good tip.
Yeah, I found that.
Fully self-supporting through your own contributions, and old enough to know how the world works. And if you've got those prerequisites in place, it doesn't mean there aren't hurt feelings, but the person, both my other half and I, realise when we've got hurt feelings, it's our problem, not the other person's problem. Now, with things affecting each other, the sort of thing where that might be the case is joint finances. And I'll tell you a really great solution to that. Don't have joint finances. But when I was, before this relationship, so this relationship has been going on for 21 years. I was in a relationship with someone else in AA for 8 years before that, and that was very good, but we were going in different directions, wanted to live in different places. But we had 3 pots of money. I had my pot of money, he had his pot of money, then we had a joint bank account to pay for common things. Then his spending didn't affect mine. My spending didn't affect his. Joint things were decided together, and it required concept 12, discussion, vote, and substantial unanimity. And you're stuck in a room until one of you gives in. Then you've got substantial unanimity. If you do that, it tends to be fine. Now, the other thing, there's a line in the big book about if you and your husband, and of course one can change the gendered words if one finds those objectionable, but if you and your husband both want to live on a spiritual basis, you're both going to be doing your best not to upset the other person. So if both people, I'll tell you what, so what love means is not soppy emotion and sentiment and even expressions of those things. And this is, I'm going to go medieval on you here. The medieval philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas, said that love is benevolence, which is wishing people well, and beneficence, which is doing good for someone else. So if both of you want the other person to be well and want to do things in their favour, both of you are going to be contributing so much and being so sensitive to the other person that nothing ever needs to be said, that we will both notice when we've done something to upset the other person, and then we'll make it right. But there's an interesting thing about conflict in relationships, because I think this is part of that whole dynamic. Of course, being in recovery, I know a lot of people who have a lot of conflict in their relationships, poor things. And I said to Jonathan, why is it that we don't argue? And he said, because we don't want to. We don't like it. And I said, why do you think they argue? He said, because they want to and they like it. Whatever is happening, and this is just, once I was told this, and it took a while to really filter through the system, when I realised that whatever is happening, someone is willing it to happen. Whatever they're saying, there is a will which is creating it. And so the conflict in a relationship is often, in my experience, it's not a problem happening within an otherwise idyllic setting. It's literally the purpose of the relationship. Because if one is unresolved in oneself, usually because of lack of forgiveness of others, or harms which have not been done, or obligations which are not being met, there's going to be this reservoir of guilt, and guilt is intolerable. If something one doesn't do something about it, it eats one alive. And so if you're full of guilt and you're not facing the real cause of the guilt, what better thing to do than to find someone else whose fault it is? And a very good way to do that is a relationship, because you've got them there 24 hours a day. They're going to do something, and then they do something and suddenly it's their fault. But one is looking for the hook to hang the anger on. The decision to be angry was already there. That's why those things can't be resolved. And it's so interesting trying to help people in recovery over the years. And when people tried to help me, it never worked. It's just like drinking, you know, when you're helping someone that's not fully committed to recovery and you do so much work and then they call and they're drunk. And in this case, they call and they're back with so-and-so and they're already having fist fights and the police are being called. What looks like a problem is a solution to another problem. And until that's realised, there's not a lot you can do. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Ash Knucklehead. You know the thing that's like 7 things that aren't your business?
Yes.
Like, so you said like yourself, and that makes sense, and it kind of like feels like it fits very well with what you said about like primary purpose and carrying the message to others. But then some of the other things in that list were like other people in the world around you.
Yes.
If they're not your business, why do any of that? Like, why is it such a good thing to like have helped these? Like, I completely agree with that, and like, yeah, I've kind of come to understand so far, at least, that kind of like, yeah, the answer to self is caring about others and doing selfless acts and trying to help fellow alcoholics. But if they aren't your business and the world about you is not your business, like, why do any of that? Does that make sense?
Well, you're mixing up 2 things. Very good question, but you're mixing up 2 things. It's not to say those things aren't important, and it's not to say those things aren't valuable, but my preoccupation with those things is not a valuable contribution to their improvement. So the notion is of God who is in charge of everything, ultimately, either directing things or willing things or permitting things, which allows room for free will and people to do stuff and get things wrong. God at the top, and God being the traditional things: omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, and all-loving. The idea is God knows everything. I have very little of the data. I don't know what the GDP of Bolivia is. I don't know the names of all the people in the world. I can't see all the way into the past and the future. I don't know what I'm having for dinner tonight. And you want to ask me what other people should do with their lives? Who knows? I don't know what I should do for the rest of the day. It comes from a position of recognizing I know very little, and me working anything out, it's going to fail. So these things are very important, but they're way above my pay grade. So the image, imagine a factory where your job is to be doing something fun and interesting on the factory floor. That's your pay grade. And once a day you go up to the boardroom where there's a board meeting, where God is having a board meeting on his own, and my job is just to take notes. And you get little glimpses of other people in the world and the past, the future, and me, my life, and these things. You get little glimpses for those 5 minutes when I'm saying to God, what shall I do today? But then I take the information, a day's worth of activities, and then just get on with it. Get on with the daily things. The point is, it's the mental, it's what one is mentally preoccupying oneself with. That's where the danger lies. Does that make sense? So one isn't concerned with other people per se, one is concerned with doing the right thing, and then what they do with that right thing you've done is their business. As Maureen said to me many years ago, your job is to broadcast the signal. It's not to go into the living room and waggle their aerial until Channel 4 comes on. You just broadcast the message, turn away. Leave the milk for the hedgehog. Don't monitor whether the hedgehog is walking up the garden path or not, because it's too frightened to. So the left hand mustn't know what the right hand is doing. You take the action and then look away and leave them to it, because they'll be fine. And if there's a problem with something, don't worry, the problem will still be there tomorrow. And if God needs you to do something about something, you'll be told to work it out, which will free up the whole afternoon. Really will. One last question before we switch gear.
Excuse me, what is it you work in?
What do I work in? I don't talk about that much in recovery, but it's when people ask my other half what I do for a living, he says typing, and that's kind of essentially what it is. So all day I just type, and then I go home, and that's the end of it. Sometimes he says it's spelling, because that's really what I'm just spelling words as I type. So that's enough of that.